I'm Kim Bremer, your host today for another edition of BoviNews, keeping you up to date on the cattle industry's latest in technology, management, genetics, and more. We're going to continue our series on carbon credits and helping producers understand how to take advantage of revenue opportunities. Today, we're talking about the soil and how farmers can take advantage of management practices like cover crops to take part in the carbon credit system. Our two panel members today will walk us through the opportunities to take advantage of soil carbon credits and how to benefit the most from a key component in the process, cover crops. First presenter is Ryan Gibbs, who will talk to us about how to take advantage of cover crops. Ryan's a regenerative livestock and grain farmer in eastern Iowa. He raises hogs, beef cattle, corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and cereal rye on his no-till and cover crop operation. Ryan's a contractor with Rantizo and offers drone services to spot spray and spread seed. In 2019, Ryan partnered with Iowa Cover Crop as an independent sales rep in Northeast Iowa to offer cover crop seed sales and application services. He's been a strong advocate for soil health and helping farmers profit from cover crops and no-till. Agriculture has been Ryan's lifelong dream. Ryan went to Hawkeye Community College and earned a degree in ag-powered technology. He came back to the farm after college and grew his operation, and in 2016, he expanded his operation again, which allowed him to farm full-time. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it. Ryan Gibbs here with Gibbs Field Ag LLC. I am a farmer in eastern Iowa, and I raise hogs, cattle, cover crops. I also do cover crop seed sales and application services. I started no-till in 18. Yeah, we raise a variety of crops: corn, soybeans, alfalfa, cereal, rye. We're diversifying some new stuff this year. We raise our own feeder cattle, hogs. We are a contract grower with JBS. We've got a 2,400 head building that we own, manage, and take care of. We offer cover crop seed sales and application services. We do it on our farm every year and have had excellent luck with it and results. We utilize drones on our operation and also do seed application with a drone and also spot spraying. Like I said before, we farm in northeastern Iowa. So when people talk to me about cover crops, they say, well, what's your goal? I guess there's a lot of goals you can have in mind. And I asked them that. I said, what do you want to get out of this? You want to reduce or prevent soil erosion? Are you looking for livestock feed? Are you going to graze it? Are you going to chop it? Are you going to bale it and wet wrap it? There's a lot of options with it. You want to reduce your input costs, fertilizer, equipment, labor, fuel, no-tilling and cover crop, and definitely does all that. You want to retain soil moisture, nutrients, help with compaction and water infiltration. That's a big thing now with lack of rains in parts of the United States. Water infiltration and keeping that water in the soil for the plants that we need it. You can build soil health, reduce weed pressure. Weed pressure is the next thing that I'm seeing a lot of customers come to me with is weed pressure in their beans, and the best way to do that is plant cereal rye and plant green into it. Don't stir up that weed bank and bury that water hemp and Palmer amaranth. We're getting a lot of weeds that are resistant to chemical, and cover crops definitely help to suppress them. Cover crops, no-till, they build soil structure, biology in your soil. When there's something growing in the ground, there's biological activity underneath the ground. That's been proven, and building that biological activity really helps to stimulate nutrients for the next crop. Next question I get is, where do I start? How do I get started in this, or what do I do? First thing I tell customers, or anybody who's even not a customer that has questions for me, I say, get soil test, have a baseline. You got to start somewhere. If you don't know what's in your soil or where you're even at, you don't know where you're starting from. So get a soil test if you haven't already. I like the Haney soil test. There's a couple labs that offer that, Regen Labs, Ward Labs, and I'm sure there's other ones too. Those are the two that I tend to work with on my farming operation. They'll give you a complete soil analysis on what's going on and what do you have out there for fertilizer. Work with your agronomist or find an agronomist that works with cover crops and put a program together for your operation and your goals. My goals on my operation are different than my neighbor's. I graze cattle on mine. My neighbor has no livestock. He's just corn soybean farmer. So his goals with his cover crop are a little bit different than my goals. Talk to other farmers who are doing it. I found out that other guys that no-till and cover crop, if you go talk to them, they're glad to tell you what they're doing. I got numerous guys in our neighborhood that I just went and talked to. I said, "Your crops look better than mine. I want to find out how to do it." And they were glad to tell me what they were doing and offer me advice and help. Um, most of them are pretty willing to share, and they're a pretty good community of people for the most part. Do some internet research. YouTube's got a lot of good videos. Kind of take them with a grain of salt. There's some good ones and maybe some not so informative ones, but there's lots and lots of them out there. I'm on Facebook quite a bit, and there's one group I like. It's called Everything Cover Crops. It's a great group, non-biased people that just talk about cover crops. And you can post ideas out there, what you're thinking of planting, what's your goal, and people will comment back, and they're for the most part very courteous and nice to you and give you some pretty decent advice. Just kind of take it with however would work with your operation. Evaluate your current equipment setup. That's one thing I did on my farm when I went to no-till and cover crop. Sold the chisel plow, sold the field finisher. I dumped that money into my planter and set it up correct. You only get one pass to do it every year, so make that pass count. Try it on a small portion of your farm is what I tell guys. If they're kind of hesitant on doing it, I don't know if I want to do it. And, what if it fails? I'm going to be out a lot of money. I said, we'll do it on 10 acres in the back 40 that nobody can see off the road. You know, Try it back there. And if it fails, well, nobody's going to see it. You're not going to be out much money. And if you work with a decent agronomist or seed salesman for cover crop, they will point you in the right direction and you will not have a failure. So learn from our mistakes and our learning experiences that we have had firsthand, because that's the first thing I tell everyone when I sell them seed or offer them services is say, hey, if this is my operation, this is how I would do it. And if you want success, these are the steps you need to take to reach that success. The NRCS has a lot of cost share options available. So don't be afraid to call them up, check in with them. Is there any payment available if I plant cover crop? What's the deadline? What's the sign up? What's the criteria? They're usually pretty decent to work with. Application methods is the next thing. How am I going to get this stuff applied? A lot of different routes there. Grain drill, plane, helicopter, drone, fertilizer spreader, combine mounted spreader. I've seen some of those. Know a few people that have spreaders attached to their vertical tillage units. They're worried about corn residue, so they go out there and they got a spreader mounted on their vertical till, and they spread the seed, and then they just barely work it in the ground. I'm talking like an inch or less. Just trickle it in the ground, not deep ripping it. Things that I did on my farm, mixed it into cattle feed. I wanted to get some more clover out in my pasture, and I seen a video where a guy was mixing clover in with his cattle feed, and they were passing it right through their system and spreading it out on the pasture for him. I got really hilly pasture. I can't drive out there with a spreader or with a seed drill and drill in clover, so I let the cattle do it for me. I'll have results on that next year if it worked or not. We'll be able to see if we got some clover coming up. Next thing is a Haggy with drop tubes. There's a few of those around. They're kind of sparse. There's really none in our area, but I know some guys in different parts of the state that have them. So there's a lot of options, on how you want to apply it and, how that pertains with your goal. Next thing, when it comes to cattle, livestock, hogs, what about all this manure I got? How is that going to work? I got to put manure out there all winter long. You got to get it put on somehow, and you don't want to smother seed or kill it off. What's my options? How am I going to deal with that? And I say, well, I'm in the exact same boat as you. I got a 2,400 head hog building. I've got anywhere from 20 to 170 head of cattle on feed at all times. So I got cattle, I got bedding pack manure. I deal with the exact same thing. I don't have a pit or a storage unit to store that manure, so I got to do something with it. Liquid manure, knife it in with a tank or drag hose it if possible. Minimum disturbance. If you can drag hose that in and save on compaction, that's a real big deal. Make sure that whoever's putting it on has a toolbar that's got minimum disturbance. Solid or bedding pack. When I went to no-till, I sold my old box beater spreader because it was getting wore out anyways. And I went and bought a slinger, a nice used slinger for $10,000. Works great. Lays that manure out there real nice and smooth. Even with big bedding pack and hard bedding pack, it just lays it out there really nice. Vertical beaters work great for that also. If you are going to use a box spreader, don't heap it plump full so there's chunks running off the back and rolling off the top of the beater. Nobody wants to go out there with a pitchfork and spread it out by hand. So lay it out there nice and even. You won't have a problem getting through it with a planter in the spring. I've done this last year. I actually spread the manure over top of my cereal rye in the field. It all came up. There's pictures on my website and my Facebook page of me planting into no-till cereal rye, and that cereal rye was covered with cattle manure all winter long. Every 2 weeks, I was cleaning out my cattle yards and spreading it over the top, laying it out there nice and thin, no big chunks. That cereal rye grew right up through the manure. I had very little impact on that cereal rye. It came up right through it like it wasn't even there. So that is an option. Just it's a management thing. We got to manage this. Um, have row cleaners on your planter. If you plant corn, beans, whatever yourself, um, have row cleaners on your planter. Um, it makes a big difference kind of keeping that stuff out so you don't have pinching in the row. Don't tear up your fields. Stay off them when they're wet. Pile the manure if you can. I understand there are situations where you don't have much of a choice. And if it comes to that, you can always go out with a field finisher and work out, your end rows or where you first drive in the field so it ain't all rutted up. But just stay off your fields, manage it. I've got manure right now that needs to get hauled. I'm waiting another week till the ground freezes up so I don't tear the field up and compact the ground. When you are spreading manure over cereal rye in the wintertime, I would not recommend doing that if you are going to chop that for feed. You are going out there in the spring with a disc mower and you're going to be cutting that pretty low to the ground. You don't want to pull in any chunks of cattle manure into your silage or your baleage. So I wouldn't do that if you're going to bale it up for feed in the spring, but if you're just planting it as a cover crop and you're going to plant into it in the spring, you won't have an issue with that. So with cover crops, hand in hand is soil health. What is healthy soil? Most guys don't bring a shovel to the field with a crop scout. They look at it from the road from their pickup and then say, yep, that field looks nice. Take a shovel out with you. Don't ever walk out in the field without a shovel in your hand. I ask farmers when they come to me with questions, I said, do you have dirt or do you have soil? Because there's a difference. Dirt is soil that's been neglected with heavy tillage, over fertilization, and poor management. That's my definition. That's the Ryan Gibbs definition of soil or of dirt. I used to have dirt. Now I have soil. We're creating a better, healthier profile. I got a lot of earthworms in my ground, a lot of wormholes. When we get heavy rains, I don't have washing off my farm like I did 4 years ago when I was chisel plowing and doing heavy tillage. We built that soil structure up. It took a year or two to do that. I integrated cover crops into my no-till system, which really helped. Like I said before, soil has lots of earthworms. It's porous. When you pull it apart, pull it out of the ground with a shovel and you pull it apart with your hands, there's a lot of wormholes. There's a lot of air pockets. And you can tell them pores are not compacted and tight. There's room for water to move into that profile and also stay in that profile for the next crop or the crop that's growing. It has a lot more holding capacity. And like I said, that goes hand in hand with your water and your oxygen. Good biology and balance of bacteria and fungi. And that's something that I would say 95% of farmers don't know is their bacteria to fungi ratio in their soil. I just found out about that this year. I didn't even know about it until I was introduced to it, had my soil tested. We need to build our fungi back up into our soil. We've killed them off with heavy tillage and lots of heavy chemical use. Backing off on chemical use, using cover crops, getting that out there builds that fungi back up, which helps with soil nutrients and microbes and getting everything in the biological process of your soil working. Fungi is hand in hand with that. And then I asked farmers, what does the future of your farming operation looks like? If you're farming year upon year and only planning for next year or 2 years down the road, that's not the future I would recommend. We got to look out 10, 15, 20, 30 years. What's the future of our farming operation? They don't make any more soil. We got to take care of what we've got. We've got to build up and maintain what we've got and make it healthier than what we left it when we started, and that's kind of my goal, is to make my farms healthier than what they were first started with me. So I start with a soil test, get a baseline, and I build upon it. And I got another next generation coming in that's going to be running the farm and operation when I'm gone, and I want it to be good for them when they take it over and they can build upon it too. I got a 2-year-old boy who loves to farm, and we got another one on the way. And I want that soil to be healthy and ready to profit for them when they go to farm it. So I got lots of pictures and stuff available. I've got a Facebook page, Gibbs Field Ag, on LLC on Facebook. I got lots of pictures, videos. I'm going to be starting a YouTube channel probably this winter sometime to get more pictures and videos out there for farmers. I've also got a web page, www.gibbsfieldag.com. There's pictures, there's video and stuff on there too that you can check things out. And feel free to call. And my contact information, email and phone is on the web page. So feel free to contact me with any questions you got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Our second presenter is Ben Gordon with Corteva, who will talk to us about getting carbon credits from those cover crops. As portfolio leader, Carbon and Ecosystem Services portfolio at Corteva AgriScience, Ben is responsible for developing holistic solutions to reward farmers for sustainable outcomes and drive farm profitability. Prior to this leadership role, Ben had been with Granular, a wholly owned subsidiary of Corteva AgriScience, for 3 years working in corporate development and product management. Before joining Granular, he worked in management consulting and served as an infantry officer in the Army National Guard. Ben grew up in North Dakota, surrounded by agriculture, and earned his MBA from the University of Minnesota. And Ben currently lives in sunny San Francisco. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Kim. Though I'm currently in Fargo, where in the hotel room it's only about 60 degrees because the heater's not working. So it's a good welcome to be home. Appreciate the chance to talk to folks, and I think there's been a lot of hype around carbon markets, and I appreciate this is part of a broader series. But I think a good place to start is just maybe where we think we're kind of at in carbon markets. And in full transparency, I think we are in that hype cycle, and we're starting to see that start to go down kind of towards that trough of disillusionment, if you will, because it's a really tough space to understand often for farmers. There's tough science in there. And so you're probably saying, well, if this is the guy that's working on carbon, you see all the challenges, you think you're at this stage. Well, then, why are we excited? Why are you even working in this job? Why are you on this on this webinar? And I think the first thing is that there's real transactions that are happening today. You look at companies out there that are making large commitments to fight climate change, and the recognition of agriculture as part of the solution, and real dollars starting to flow, gets us really, really excited, for our farmer customers and partners. And when we look at kind of where that all goes, and we can almost always say start with the money, to make sure this is real and worth farmers' time. I think it's important to look at both the size of the prize and kind of where things are headed. And so if you look at a lot of estimates out there, this is likely going to be somewhere between a $2 and $8 billion opportunity for agriculture, which is pretty darn significant. That's almost another ethanol, if you will. And there's this beautiful virtuous cycle where as more and more folks start adopting these practices, like Ryan has mentioned, and you have more of these payments, all of a sudden the payments themselves will increase because the uncertainties and some of the difficulties of these markets go away with scale. But if you've been farming for a while, or you've just been in the industry, you're probably asking yourself, hasn't this been tried before and failed absolutely miserably? And it was the first question that I asked myself. And really, when we look at what's happening today versus what happened in 2012 or between 2008 and 2012, I think the biggest difference is just the type of buyer. So I mentioned we're seeing transactions today. That wasn't the case then. It was a speculative market that was based on the assumption that cap and trade was going to get passed in the Obama years, versus today where we're seeing real transactions, real dollars all flowing. It's not just some pie in the sky in the future. But I think the bigger thing that gets me excited is just what you're seeing at the farm gate. And I think Ryan's presentation is a great example. There's a heck of a lot more folks that are starting to adopt these practices: cover cropping, reduced tillage, better nitrogen management. You just go on ag Twitter or just drive down the road, and it's just a different picture than it was 10, 15 years ago. And that's probably where I get a heck of a lot more excited. It's not just some top-down push from outside the industry, but they are bringing those net new dollars. But it's also that bottom up from farmers who are saying this is the right agronomic decision. And frankly, I think that's something you're gonna hear from me, and I'm gonna be a little bit of a broken record. But I just want to it to be very, very clear. Like, this all starts with agronomy, and the folks like Ryan that are out there and helping farmers and farmers themselves who are driving those changes. Like, that's where the real innovation in this space is. We're kind of just paper pushers on the carbon side to help tip that scale. So speaking of tipping the scale, I think there's a really important thing that we want our farmers that are engaging with us and our customers to know about carbon markets. And that's the first one. You have to start with the agronomy. It's agronomy first, it's agronomy second, it's agronomy third. Then let's talk about a carbon market, because today the cost of implementing these practices is greater than just the carbon payments that we're going to talk about. And so that means you have to believe in some of those soil health benefits. And Ryan mentioned a lot of them, whether it's water infiltration, reducing weed pressure, decreasing erosion, a myriad that depends on your operation and your farm. You have to believe in that practice. And then carbon programs, other government programs, or other cost shares out there, we're really just helping to tip the scale on that ROI. And so when you're really thinking about the what's in it for you, starting with those agronomic benefits, yep, that's like where most of the focus needs to be. Then we need to be talking about, okay, what can a carbon program give me today, and what can it be in the future? Because I think most people in the industry expect prices to continue to increase fairly rapidly, which means you need to make sure you're not just getting a good deal today, but getting a good deal in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. So how does a carbon program actually work in row crops in the soil side? The first thing you need to do is sign up for a program, choose a program that makes sense for you. We'll talk about some things to consider. But really it all starts, like I said before, with the agronomy. So choosing the right practice for the right acre or the right field. Then the next thing you need to be doing is logging those practices and getting that baseline of data that is both digital data that you need. So your planting, your yields, nitrogen applications, what you've done from tillage, what you've done from cover cropping. You're going to establish that baseline both with the data as well as soil sampling that helps to both calibrate the models that are used as well as to set that baseline. Then you work with partners. So we as Corteva help to simplify all of this, but there's plenty of other players out there who go and actually measure and certify the credits. And I think it's really important to understand, and we'll talk about what types of credits they are and how do you get it certified to make sure they're actually going to be of value. Because really having those premium certified credits, that's how you're eventually going to get paid down the road, and not just be making a claim that's not going to result in net new dollars for your farm. So double click a little bit more on just, how does the carbon impact get measured? Like I mentioned before, it's a combination of soil sampling and modeling. A lot of you folks you probably already do a lot of sampling. This is pretty different in that you also need to have bulk density cores. And so just going out and doing your normal fertility sampling isn't what's needed here. Most programs will pay for it themselves, something to look at. I know ours certainly does, but it's really important to get that baseline. And then we use that data year over year to model the change and model what would have happened if your practice wouldn't have been implemented. And that's a really important concept and that we'll get into about the agronomic flexibility that we want to maintain. So we've already talked about, the agronomy needs to make a heck of a lot of sense. It's going to be a combination of soil sampling and data collection in whatever digital tool you're using to get there. But what do you actually need to look for in a carbon program? And we really think it falls into 3 important buckets. One, am I getting a fair deal? Really what we're talking about there is pricing. And am I getting a fair deal now and in the future? So how is the value being shared? Am I able to capture that market upside as things are moving forward? And what accountability can I give to my program, or am I getting locked in? The second is, what's the level of effort? So is it a digital tool that I've never used before that doesn't have any agronomic benefits? Do I have support? Is there a human in the loop, or am I just kind of thrown at a web page and told to figure it out? We're big believers in trying to really simplify the heck out of this, and also having a human next to folks. And then the last thing is just, what am I committing to? And this is the one that I probably get the most questions on. And I think, I'm glad, because it's the area that we really encourage farmers to be spending a lot of time. So the first thing is, agronomic flexibility. Are you going to have to farm for a carbon contract, or can you farm for the right agronomy and the right management, as Ryan so aptly put it? These practices require management, but some years you might need to bring that field finisher out. If you get in there a little early and rut something up, you need to make sure your program lets you do that, so you have a good seed bed next year. You don't want to be farming for a carbon contract. You want to be farming for your operation. Second thing is just that commitment to a given company or program. We're big believers that farmers need to maintain some optionality there and hold folks like us accountable so we can re-earn that business. And so that's what we've tried to build our program around. And so when we really think about it, we think about this market in kind of three words: confidence, simplicity, and flexibility. So when I'm talking about confidence, it's really that confidence that you are getting a fair deal. So are you generating a real credit that is third-party verified, something that will be sellable, not just some, ephemeral object that just doesn't actually doesn't have any real value. Then what does pricing look like? So we guarantee that a farmer will, not just this year, but in the future, get 75% of the contracts, the credit value right there in the contract. And then we put a price floor at $15 a ton. And so what happens is, you go out, you execute the practice, we help you quantify how many tons of carbon were sequestered or the emissions that were reduced. Then we go sell those credits off. And you get 75% of the value to make sure that we're on the same side of the table as the farmer. We don't want to be the ones who are, kind of that counterparty, because we really want to make sure that farmers are able to get paid on those outcomes and not be locked into, a low dollar per acre payment. The next piece is simplicity. For us, we use our free tool, Granular Insights, that you can also use for things like seed placement, ROI of given practices, field by field profitability. And then we have a dedicated carbon team to provide support that works alongside the existing farm team that you have. So if you're working with someone like Ryan as an agronomist, we don't want to bring in a new person to replace what Ryan's doing. We want to bring in someone, if you want, to help you with the data management, to just navigate through the program areas, or to help Ryan as he's helping you to do that. So that way you're not just going to throw into the wolves on these programs. And of course, data privacy is always paramount in what we're doing. And I think that holds for carbon programs as well. And then the last thing is flexibility. I hate to beat a dead horse here, but just the importance of choosing the practices that work on the right acre, starting with that agronomy, is just so incredibly important. And then having that flexibility agronomically to then change as just conditions change. Because again, we want you farming for your operation and for your own profitability, not just for a carbon program. So our initiative, we do require a net new practice change because that's what buyers require. One of the themes you've probably caught on already is just the need to kind of follow the money. And so really the practices that we're talking about are the introduction of cover crops, reduction of tillage, or increasing nitrogen efficiency. And that's essentially any acre where you've done any of those things post-harvest since 2020 is where you would be eligible for a program like this. We're currently in 11 states, but we'll be rapidly expanding here in the new year. 17 crop types in there supported, and I think just worth calling out on the corn that both silage and grain corn is available for this audience. And I know we'll probably chat after this a little bit about manure and some of the unique elements here that are important. But we are in a lot of the major dairy and cattle states. So to kind of just summarize on what our program looks like and just kind of why we care, it's kind of making sure that you get those premium payments both today and the future, the agronomic flexibility, and that simplicity. And so we've just tried to really build a program all around that. There's a lot of other great programs out there. You should take a look at them. You really need to look more broadly. Don't just look at us. You need to find the right program for your farm, just like you need to find the right practice for the right acre. But one thing that I do kind of want to urge folks is if you are starting to adopt these practices, like Ryan so aptly described on how you're able to go do that, I would strongly urge folks to think about it. So why sign up now? Why not wait? Well, the first thing, and we always get this question, should I just give it a few years and see how things shake out? Because of that additionality and that eligibility criteria, if you start a practice this year, but you don't sign up either this year or next year, you might not be eligible for those premium credits down the road, and you likely won't be. And so it's a bit of a moving target where you kind of need to hit it at the right time. So we really urge folks, take a hard look, make sure you're able to opt out, hold folks accountable in that program, but don't also miss the boat as well. Second big piece is just 5 to 10 years of long commitment. We get that. We want to build in opt-outs, and we know that these markets are likely going to change. And so as things change, you need to make sure you have the right incentives in the contract so you can take advantage of that upside without removing your own downside. And so really the takeaways that I really urge folks to have is, first, second, third, actually, just first evaluate the practice ROI, ask the agronomy, the tough agronomic questions, make sure it's right for your farm. And then when you start looking at carbon programs, be tough on us. Make sure you're asking us the tough questions, hold us accountable, but make sure you're able to see and get some of that upside as the market grows itself. And if you want any more details, Corteva.com/carbon, we have a carbon calculator that helps look at payments both from our program as well as things like EQIP and CSP. But just really, really want to reemphasize a lot of what Ryan said. The agronomics of this are so darn important. We as folks that are working in the carbon space, our job is to help enable you to get that extra new revenue stream. You got to be tough on us and others to make sure you're getting a good deal, But if you are adopting these practices, it's a great way to de-risk and accelerate and add a new revenue stream to the farm.
Thank you, Ben. So, a few questions for the two of you. Let's talk a little bit about the data side of this in the carbon credit program. Ben, how much time should producers allocate for data collection? How involved is that process?
Yeah, so I would say it's a little different to start and ongoing. To start, it's going to be a little bit more because you need to have that baseline, and it's also going to depend operation by operation, depending on how much data you're already collecting. Now, luckily, most of this data is what you're using for if you're doing any sort of variable rate seeding or fertility that's out there. But I think we'd suggest it's going to be somewhere between, depending on the operation, 3 to 10 hours to get set up on kind of that first period. But if you're already managing a lot of data for just your operation, you might already be collecting 95% of it, and it could be minutes or a few hours versus towards that 10.
We also hear that as a concern from producers, and I think you alluded to it in your talk as well. But are there protections in place? I know that some producers are concerned about protecting their data.
Yeah, so we have a privacy policy and that's compliant with Ag Data Transparent. All the partners that we work with are as well. So we take that very, very seriously. And again, you probably heard a lot of like third party and contractual from me, and it's hold us accountable on that. And the data is only used for the generation of the credit. It's not shared downstream with other players. It's only used for that generation of the credit itself.
And can you also just touch on length of contracts?
Yep. So we have a 5-year contract, but there's that annual opt out. Again, we want to have to earn that business year over year. There's a lot changing, and we're big believers that farmers should be able to have some optionality there to hold us accountable and make us earn that business.
Ryan, obviously you're a cover crop expert, a huge advocate. If someone is still on the fence about using cover crops, what would you say to them? Would push them over the edge? I know that I've heard the comment from producers, I just can't grow cover crops here. It just doesn't work for me. I tried it in the past. What would you say to that?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is you can grow cover crops in any state in the United States. It's just what crop are you going to grow? What works in Virginia might not work in Minnesota. We have different climates. But what might push a producer over the fence to try it or to do it again, this year in particular, we're looking at feed costs. You're looking at corn and beans, record price. They got to buy more of a protein source. They might say, well, I got this cornfield I just chopped. Can I get another crop off of it in the spring before I plant it again? And that's where, cereal rye might fit into their picture, or triticale or winter wheat. Something that's winter hardy that they can get established after chopping corn silage, and they can grow that through the winter. It'll grow up until it gets too cold, then it'll go dormant, but it'll be ready to harvest in the spring, and they can pull a crop off of that before they go and seed it down with corn again or beans or whatever they plan on doing with that. And that's going to take some planning. Before you plant something, you got to look ahead to next year and say, what am I going to put in that field next year? Don't throw something out there without a plan of what you're going to do next year. Another thing that might push a producer over the fence, I talked to numerous producers, weed problems. And I touched on this earlier. Palmer amaranth, water hemp, the list goes on. We're seeing weeds that are getting resistant to chemical. And I've firsthand seen fields split 50-50 cover crop and no cover crop. And one side of the field had weeds and the other side didn't. Just that much difference we've seen in the last 2 years. Just by putting cover crops down to help suppress our weeds. And not, if you can work that soil a minimum or no till at all, that also makes a big difference. Anytime that you are moving that soil, you're burying weed seeds. So those are the two things that I've talked to producers and heard the most concern with: feed cost and weed pressure.
Now, what do we do about the situation of farmers who are doing the land management practices, things like no-till, reduced tillage, even cover crops for a really long time? Are there any opportunities in the carbon credit market for any of that historical work, or is that out of the picture?
So for the premium kind of offsets and registry approved credits, the rules are written as such where I don't really foresee that being an option in the near term, really, or medium term. Now, I think I am excited about a lot of opportunities that are starting to emerge for those folks to get credit for having a lower carbon intensity. They're not there yet. There's a lot of folks working on it. Obviously, we are working on it as well. And as someone who's from North Dakota, where no-till, especially where a lot of my family's from in the North Central, they've been doing that for 20 years. And so, like, why are you paying the crappy farmers? Now, don't agree. Tillage has a place in a lot of cases. But right now, we got to follow the money. And I also don't want to sign folks up for a program where there's going to be a lot of work involved, but there's not going to be a transaction at the end of it. And so we just try to be really transparent with folks. Hey, are you eligible or you're not? We want to work to get more folks eligible every day. We have all the incentive in the world to get more folks eligible, but we have to follow the rules of the market if we're going to allow that net new revenue stream to flow into ag.
And I like how you alluded to and talked a lot about the flexibility in the programs, because I think there's also some concern out there as well that if something changes and you need to be able to change something agronomically, are you going to be handcuffed, so to speak, by your carbon program? And that's not the case.
No, I mean, for us, if you need to go bring out a tillage implement on a field, you're not going to get paid that year on carbon for it because you tilled the land up, but you probably did it for a reason that made a heck of a lot of sense. And so you're not going to get penalized. We're not going to ask for money back. You're not kicked out of the program. You're just not going to get paid because you didn't sequester or reduce emissions, but you did it for the right reason.
And does manure affect carbon crediting at all if crop ground gets manure applications?
So there are some benefits to it today. There are some additional crediting that happens. I think we're pretty darn excited about where some of the additional data and science is headed to actually give more crediting on that, because folks that have incorporated livestock, I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there about that really juicing the amount of carbon and the quality of the soil health and the biology. So I think for us, we have to wait a little bit for the science to be peer reviewed and to meet the market demands. But we're pretty excited about where that's going. But there is a small premium today.
And then I just want to end today by asking each of you about the future for both carbon crediting and for cover crops. What do you see coming down the road? We'll start out with cover crops.
Well, the cover crops in general, the future is, bright. I'm seeing it in our neighborhood, in our area of eastern Iowa. Fields that have never had cover crop on them ever before are green this fall. So we are seeing it. Me personally, my sales year over year have just skyrocketed, and people are becoming interested in it. They're seeing what we're doing. They're seeing it's working, and having somebody that they can talk to about it, who's going to teach them and show them so they don't have mistakes. That's a big thing. So the future of cover crops is definitely bright, and it's going to expand, and it's going to be everywhere in the near future. There's just so many options on what you want to put out there for a cover crop. It's not just like one or two or three different products. There's a whole array of products, and each one of them has a purpose. So, there's so many options with that, and it goes hand in hand with the carbon market. So it's good for the environment, it's good for the soil, and it puts profit in farmers' back pocket. I'm a farmer firsthand. I know my numbers. I have spreadsheets. It's made me money. So, I can relate to that, and I can show my customers and show other people who are interested in it, what's your bottom line and how is this going to work in your operation? And it does work. So the future looks bright. And like I said before, we can go hand in hand with the carbon market and really make this thing a go.
Ben, what's the future hold for carbon crediting?
Everything that Ryan just said, that's where the real innovation and the real drive is happening at the farm gate. And so as it relates to the carbon markets, as the agronomic ROI continues to increase, as it becomes easier, these markets will scale. As scale happens, payments will increase. And so I'd say we're probably in the toughest time for carbon markets right now that will be in the next 20 years, 10, 20 years. And it's only going to get easier from a data perspective. Payments are only going to get up. So as long as folks are following the right agronomic practices, working, learning locally, I think you're going to see a lot of growth. Hopefully it's less hype, and it's just more payments and more simplicity. And this just becomes kind of the way of doing business.
Well, thank you so much, Ben and Ryan, for joining us today and sharing your invaluable expertise and experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the BoviNews channel on YouTube, find our BoviNews podcasts on your favorite listening platform, or find more information at bovinews.com. Thanks for tuning in with us today, and we'll see you next time on another edition of BoviNews.